It started with a smile, not a stranger's grin, not the kind that passes on a busy street and vanishes. No, this one knew your name. It had shared your laughter, finished your sentences, seen you cry, and never looked away. It was the kind of smile that made you feel safe, until it didn't. You never expect the knife. Not from the hands that once held yours through the dark. Not from the voice that used to whisper, "I'll always be here." But the knife doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it slides in silently, between conversations, behind good intentions, beneath borrowed intimacy. And when it lands, it's not just your heart that breaks, it's your sense of reality. How could someone who once loved you hurt you? And that's the question you replay over and over like a broken film reel in your head, as if there's a different ending waiting in one of the frames, as if maybe, just maybe this time you'll understand. But let me tell you something. Understanding is rarely the balm you think it will be. Because betrayal is not logical. It's emotional shrapnel. And the wound isn't just where they stabbed you, it's where you kept holding space for them long after they walked away. The hardest part isn't even the act itself. It's the dissonance, the whiplash between what you believed and what actually happened. The way their voice, their warmth, their presence all become haunted echoes in your memory. You begin to doubt not just them, but you, your intuition, your worth, your ability to tell who is safe. That is the real damage of betrayal. It erodes your inner compass. It makes you feel like love is just a performance, and safety is a story someone tells before they disappear. But here's what I want you to know gently, softly, like someone sitting beside you in silence. You didn't imagine the good parts. They were real, but so was the moment they chose something else. And that contrast doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. You believed, you gave, you trusted, and that is not weakness. That is the strength of someone who still believes in love even after being handed its sharpest edges. Let this be the first step in your return, not to trusting them, but to trusting your own heart again. The one that didn't deserve to be broken. The one that stayed soft, even when the world tried to harden it. The one that still beats quietly, but faithfully beneath the scar. Because you are not the betrayal. You are the one who survived it. You didn't betray them. You didn't lie. You didn't manipulate. You simply grew. You healed a little more. You got quieter inside. You started setting boundaries. You smiled from a place of peace instead of performance. And somehow, that was the problem. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your light illuminated the places in them that were still dark. They weren't ready to see themselves yet. And so instead of turning inward to do the work, they turned away from you. Or worse, they turned against you. It's confusing, isn't it? You thought love meant growing together. You thought honesty would be safe. You thought they'd celebrate your healing, your wins, your return to yourself. But instead, your light made them flinch. Because your stability reminded them of their chaos. Your self-awareness felt like a mirror they couldn't look into. Your quiet joy, so gentle and sacred, echoed through the chambers of their shame. And they didn't know how to handle that. So they hurt you. Not because you hurt them, but because you didn't dim yourself to protect their comfort. This kind of betrayal, it's the hardest to grieve. Because it wasn't loud or obvious. It was subtle, silent. It wore a smile, and yet it cut deeper than anything that came before. Because you start to wonder, is it wrong to shine? Let me answer that for you. No. Your light is not the problem. Your wholeness is not the offense. Your calm, your clarity, your growth, they're not weapons. They're gifts. But not everyone knows how to receive them. Some people only know how to exist in chaos. So when you walk in with stillness, they confuse it for judgment. When you show up as yourself, they mistake it for a threat. But their reaction is not your responsibility. You don't have to apologize for arriving at a place they refuse to seek. You don't have to shrink to keep people close. Let them leave if they must. Let them betray what they couldn't understand. And you keep shining anyway. Not to prove anything, not to win them back, but because your light is who you are, and it was never meant to be hidden just to make someone else feel less alone in their darkness. You didn't break them. You didn't shame them. You didn't confront them with harsh truths. You simply were. You were honest. You were growing. You were becoming. And in doing so, you became something dangerous, a mirror. Not the kind that flatters, not the kind that hides shadows in good lighting, but the kind that shows what's real, the kind that reflects without judgment, the kind that makes someone stop and see. And that was too much, because they weren't ready. They had spent years curating a version of themselves they could tolerate, a persona built on survival, not truth. And you, just by showing up as yourself, threatened to undo that entire illusion. You didn't mean to do it. You didn't ask to be a mirror, but your presence, your clarity, your emotional honesty, it triggered something in them. It said, this is possible. This is what alignment looks like. This is what it means to live without pretending. And they weren't ready for that kind of awakening. So, instead of turning inward, they turned on you. Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but only if we're willing to look. Most people aren't. So when the mirror becomes too clear, too loud, too true, they shatter it. Not because it lied, but because it made them feel seen in a way that terrified them. They couldn't face their jealousy, so they called you arrogant. They couldn't own their fear, so they said you were too intense. They couldn't admit their guilt, so they made you the villain. You became the scapegoat for everything they had buried. And that is not your burden. You were never meant to carry someone else's denial. You are not responsible for what they refuse to heal. You were just the mirror. And mirrors don't cause pain, they reveal it. So let that be your freedom. Let it be the reason you stop questioning your truth. Let it be the soft permission to keep being exactly who you are. Because being a mirror is not a crime. And the people who are meant to walk with you, they won't shatter when they see their reflection. They'll reach for your hand and say, "Thank you for helping me see." It took you a long time to stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" You rewound every conversation, replayed every smile, dissected every moment where things felt real and then suddenly didn't. You begged yourself for answers. Because surely something in you must have caused this. Something must have triggered the shift. Something must have been too much. But here's the truth. The one that feels too soft to trust at first. The betrayal was never about you. It was about their pain, their shame, their unfinished business with themselves. And you just happened to be there when their shadow got too loud to ignore. That's the thing no one tells you. Not all betrayals are calculated. Not all cruelty is born from malice. Sometimes it comes from fear. The fear of being seen. The fear of not being enough. The fear that if someone loves the real version of them, they'll still end up abandoned. So they sabotage it first. They betray what feels too true, too intimate, too raw, because they don't trust themselves to hold it. Because real love terrifies the parts of them still loyal to survival, not sincerity. And you, with your open hands and steady eyes, were the most frightening thing of all. It's not an excuse. It's not a reason to let them back in, but it is a reason to let go of the guilt you've been quietly carrying. You didn't fail. You didn't cause it. You didn't break what was already cracked before you arrived. They couldn't receive what they didn't yet know how to hold. They betrayed you, not because you were unworthy, but because they couldn't meet you where you stood, honest, exposed, and whole. And maybe that's the most heartbreaking truth of all, because you would have held them through it. You would have stayed. You would have helped them heal. But they didn't want healing. They wanted control. They wanted safety without vulnerability. They wanted the illusion, not the mirror. So now you stop waiting for closure. You stop begging your own heart for permission to feel broken. You start whispering to yourself, "It wasn't me. It was never me." It was the war they refused to fight inside themselves. And you just got caught in the crossfire. But now you're walking out, scarred maybe, but freer. And in that freedom, you begin again. It didn't start with hate. It started with silence. The kind that crept in after you shared something good. A win. A soft joy. A piece of yourself that felt proud. You expected them to smile with you, but their smile didn't quite reach their eyes. They said good for you, but the room got colder. You thought you imagined it, so you shared less, dimmed a little, played smaller, but nothing changed. Because the truth was already there underneath their nods, their delayed replies, their subtle jokes that stung a little too sharp. It was envy. Not loud, not obvious. Not the kind that screams or fights, but the kind that watches you bloom and starts to wither inside. And slowly, your light became unbearable to them. Your growth felt like their failure. Your healing made their avoidance impossible. Your joy exposed their bitterness. And because they didn't know what to do with that, they turned it into resentment. Then resentment became distance. Distance became coldness. Coldness became betrayal. Not always dramatic. Sometimes it looked like gossip. Sometimes like ghosting. Sometimes like indifference that used to be care. But the pain felt the same. You might have blamed yourself. Did I share too much? Was I bragging? Maybe I should have held back. But you weren't the problem. You were just a reminder. A reminder of what they hadn't faced, what they hadn't healed, what they still longed for but weren't ready to chase. And instead of being inspired, they got bitter. That's what envy does. It doesn't always say, "I want what you have." It says, "I hate that you have it because I don't." So they turned your confidence into arrogance, your wholeness into selfishness, your boundaries into coldness, your peace into threat. Not because you were any of those things, but because it was easier than facing their own reflection. And that hurts, I know, because you would have cheered for them. You would have clapped with your whole heart. But not everyone claps for those who bloom beside them. Some only clap when they feel ahead. Let this be your reminder. Don't shrink for those who haven't stretched. Don't dull yourself for eyes still closed. Don't apologize for shining when you worked so hard to light your own way. Their envy is not yours to carry. Their betrayal is not your shame to hold. You didn't do anything wrong, except become someone they could no longer pretend not to envy. And that is not your fault. It's just the truth. And sometimes truth leaves. But it also makes space for those who will see your light and feel warmed by it, not threatened. They didn't hurt the loud ones, the distant ones, the people who pushed back, who threatened to leave. They hurt you. The one who stayed, the one who listened, the one who forgave even when it broke you a little more each time. And maybe you've asked yourself, why me? Why did they choose your kindness to betray? Why did they take your softness and twist it into something disposable? Here's the truth. You've been too gentle to say out loud because you were safe. You were the place where their shadow could unravel. You were the one who wouldn't run when it got messy. You were the only soul they trusted enough to bleed all over, even if you were never meant to carry the wound. They hurt you because you made space for them. And they mistook that space for something to fill with their chaos, their guilt, their shame. You didn't scare them. You didn't judge them. You didn't make them feel small. But that kind of safety, the rare, sacred kind, can feel terrifying to someone who's never known what it's like to be held without condition. So instead of leaning in, they lashed out, not because you deserved it, but because they didn't know what to do with something real. It's twisted, isn't it? The way people sometimes destroy what they secretly long for most. Because safety comes with vulnerability, and vulnerability threatens the walls they've spent years building. So when you walked in, open, whole, honest, they panicked. They tried to break the connection before it could break their illusion. They betrayed you, not because you failed them, but because you reminded them of what they didn't believe they could keep. And in that moment, self-sabotage won. But here's the quiet miracle you may have missed. Even after the betrayal, you still care. Even through the tears, you still believe in softness. Even after being shattered, you still choose to love. That isn't weakness. That's strength the world doesn't know how to name. You were safe, and they weren't ready for it. That's not your failure. That's their unfinished journey. So please don't punish yourself for being the sanctuary. Don't harden just because they couldn't honor what they were given. The right ones, the ones who've met their own shadow and chosen to heal, they will hold you with the same reverence you offered so freely. And when they do, you'll know being safe was never the problem. It was the gift. They just weren't ready to receive it. You didn't start the fire, but your presence made the smoke rise, and they couldn't ignore it anymore. That's what happens when someone who's never cleaned their wounds meets someone who's begun to heal. It doesn't matter that you were kind, or that you never meant to cause harm. To them, your healing felt like danger, your clarity like confrontation, your self-trust like judgment. You didn't say a word, and still they heard 1,000 things, because what you triggered in them had nothing to do with you and everything to do with what they never dared to face. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And you were the soul they had to face. You reminded them of what they abandoned, of the dreams they buried, of the truth they pretended didn't matter. You became the spotlight on everything they kept in shadow. So they did what the frightened ego always does. It defended itself. It called your light too much, your honesty too intense, your boundaries selfish, your love manipulative. Because it's easier to make you the problem than to turn inward and ask what part of me is still bleeding. They didn't betray you to win. They betrayed you to escape the discomfort of being exposed by someone who wasn't even trying to expose anything. That's how fragile the unhealed self can be, and how dangerous it becomes when it chooses destruction over self-reflection. And here's the part that stings. You would have stayed. You would have walked beside them through the fire, held the mirror gently, waited with patience. But they weren't ready to fight the war you unknowingly awakened. So instead, they made you the battlefield, and when it was over, you were the one left tending to the ruins. But that war, it was never yours. The bloodshed, the silence, the lies, the sudden shift from closeness to cruelty, it was all part of their reckoning, not your failure. So now, you walk away, not with shame, but with understanding, not carrying their war in your chest, but laying it down at their feet, because you don't owe anyone your destruction just because your existence made them uncomfortable. You didn't trigger their wounds, you revealed them. And they chose denial over healing, but you choose peace. And that is how you win a war you never asked to fight. You kept reaching for the glue. Every time it cracked, you told yourself it could be fixed. Every time they pulled away, you leaned in harder. You made excuses, found hope in breadcrumbs, held on to memories like life rafts in an ocean that had long since let go of you, because you believed that love meant healing, that if you just tried hard enough, loved deep enough, waited long enough, they would come around. But some things aren't broken, they're finished. And that's the difference your heart didn't want to see. Not everything that falls apart is asking to be saved. Sometimes the crack is the message. The silence is the answer. The distance is the direction. But we're taught to stay, to fight for it, to never give up on someone you love. And so you stayed past the goodbye. You fought past the end. You loved long after it stopped being love. And what did it cost you? Your peace, your self-respect, your softness. You lost pieces of yourself trying to hold together something that had already let you go. It wasn't noble, it was self-abandonment. It wasn't loyalty, it was fear. Fear that if it ended, it would mean you failed. Fear that walking away meant giving up. But here's the truth. Letting go is not giving up. It's giving back to yourself the energy you kept pouring into something that only drained you. You don't have to fix what hurt you. You don't have to carry what couldn't carry you. You don't have to keep sewing threads into a fabric that keeps unraveling. Sometimes, the most healing thing you can do is walk away from what you once begged to keep. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but out of love for yourself. Because you deserve wholeness, not fragments. You deserve peace, not apology-shaped promises. You deserve presence, not potential. And when something keeps breaking you, it's not your job to glue it back together. It's your job to walk out of the ruins and build something new, with gentler hands, on safer ground, with someone who doesn't need your pain to feel their own power. No part of you deserved it. Not your softness, not your loyalty, not the version of you that stayed too long hoping they'd change. You weren't too much. You weren't naive. You weren't blind. You were loving. You were human. You were brave enough to believe in someone who didn't yet know how to believe in themselves. And that says everything about you and nothing about why they hurt you. So let's get that straight. Their betrayal wasn't your karma. It wasn't your lesson. It wasn't some cosmic punishment for loving deeply. It was a rupture, one they created. But you will make it a root. Because here's the thing about people who love with their whole heart. When they're broken, they grow. It's slow. It's quiet. It doesn't look like strength at first. It looks like crying in the shower. Like deleting a message you almost sent. Like sitting alone in a room full of memories and deciding one breath at a time to stay present anyway. Healing isn't always a revelation. Sometimes it's a decision made in silence, a refusal to carry shame that was never yours, a choice to stop asking why they didn't love you better and start asking how you can love yourself more truthfully now. You don't heal by rewriting the past. You heal by reclaiming your future, by remembering that your heart was not made to shrink to fit someone else's fear. You were meant to expand, to love louder, to trust again wisely, slowly, but again. Not because they were worth it, but because you are. So grow. Even here, even now. Let this be the place you plant your feet, shake the dust from your spirit, and rise. Not in defiance, but in quiet, sacred wholeness, because you are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become from it. There will come a day when you look back at all of it, the silence, the shattering, the moment you realized they weren't who you thought they were, and you'll feel something unexpected. Not rage, not longing, not even sadness, but peace. Because somewhere between the ache and the awakening, you remembered who you are. You stopped defining yourself by the way someone mishandled your heart. You stopped begging for clarity from people who only ever offered confusion. You stopped shrinking your spirit just to be held in someone else's comfort zone. That is awakening. Not some lightning bolt from the sky. Not a chant or a miracle or a clean break, but a slow, steady return to your inner voice. The one that says, I deserve more than what broke me. I deserve the kind of love that doesn't ask me to vanish. Awakening is walking away without needing them to watch. It's healing without needing them to understand. It's living fully without waiting for closure that was never coming. And it's not bitterness, it's freedom. The kind that blooms when you stop needing to be chosen and start choosing yourself. You are not just the one who was betrayed. You are the one who rose anyway. You are not just the one who was abandoned. You are the one who returned to your own side. You are not just the one who broke. You are the one who rebuilt, not harder, but deeper. Because now, you don't love to earn. You love to give. You don't stay to prove. You stay to grow. You don't chase. You recognize. And that is what makes you sovereign. So, here you are, no longer tangled in the story they left you in. No longer apologizing for the way you care. No longer lowering your light to fit inside a room that was always too small for your soul. You are not what they did. You are what you've done since. You're awake now. And nothing is more powerful than someone who has been cracked open and chose to rise whole.